Someone once called it the ultimate roll of the dice. You know what he was talking about? $1 million on the pass line Las Vegas gamble? A cross-country move, sight unseen, to take a new job? No. The writer was talking about marriage, the ultimate roll of the dice. Now why? For anyone who's married and committed to that marriage, the answer is obvious. You've staked your entire life, the rest of your life, to one particular person, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, in prosperity and in poverty, through thick and thin, speaking of diets. And you've promised to stay by that side of that new husband, that new wife, for the rest of your life, as long as we both shall live. Now, most of us stand there at the altar thinking about the honeymoon and how wonderful the next 50 years are going to be. But you know that down the road there are going to be some hardships. There are going to be some worse along with the better. I'll never forget seeing a little old hunched over couple at a spiritual fellowship weekend a few years ago. Grandma and Grandpa had been married probably 60 years. And now this dear woman had Alzheimer's disease. All of us present watched as her husband tenderly took care of her, helping her with her meals, guiding her back to their hotel room, steering her through the many moments of mental confusion. Now, he was still a strong-looking man with some good years left in him. There was quite a bit of tread still on his tires. He could easily have slipped out of the back door and found someone else. But you know, he'd made a promise, a commitment. So he stayed right there with his bride of 60 years. Oh, this takes us to the commitment you and I have been exploring together here in these devotions about your most radical decision. Our decision to surrender our lives to God. Well, that's the super ultimate roll of the dice. That is the biggest decision a thinking man or woman can ever make. Remember, we're not talking about giving God just one bad habit, such as lying or an envious attitude. We're not talking about a trial marriage where we say, okay, I'll try church for the next 3 or 4 weeks and see if it makes me feel any better. No. This kind of surrender is the surrender of everything. We don't give God part. We give him all, every part of us. In fact, we give up any idea of doing part of the job ourselves. We turn over the pink slip and all the registration papers to God. Listen, have you done that yet? Right now, Jeannie and I and my video team are praying for you. Yes, it's a big choice, the biggest, but it's also the best decision you can make. Let me tell you very personally, this is a roll of the dice that is a guaranteed winner. Once you've made that choice, friend, you are a Christian. That commitment counts. At that very moment, you are saved. I want to say a special word of encouragement to those of you who may have very recently decided to give your life to God and who want to have assurance that you actually are saved. I want to know you say. In previous talks, I've shared some verses such as 1 John 5:13, which tell us that we can indeed know that we have eternal life. Read it, underline it, memorize it for yourself, 1 John 5:13. Oh, but then what about tomorrow and next month and next year? You might enter into a marriage commitment this coming Sunday at church and discover 5 years from now that you're no longer married. The relationship of trust has shattered on the rocks. Can the same thing happen in the Christian life? Can we commit our lives to Jesus Christ and determine that we'll live in a trust relationship with him and then later change our minds, back out? And if we can do that, what happens to our assurance? Do we have to walk around with a wobbly kind of fear in our hearts. Saved, lost, saved, lost, saved, lost. Is our salvation security no more reliable than those tumbling dice in Las Vegas? Let me say one thing. I'm glad we have a God who doesn't force us. He welcomes our commitment, and He's happy to hold us securely in His loving grasp. But He never forces us to stay there. I've seen people who committed their lives to God and who later decided to take a walk. And you know, God permitted them to do that. With tears in His eyes, He let them go. But that doesn't have to be. I want to share a delightful little math illustration that gives me real comfort. I understand that sometimes in higher level, upper grade classes, a student may decide to prove some long and tangled geometry postulate or theorem that one might have 10 or 15 intermediate steps to it. And he uses what we call the proof by induction approach. It goes like this. If you can prove the first link in the chain, let's say that A equals B, and then you can prove that every subsequent step leads to the one right after it, that C must follow B, and that D comes after C, then that immediately takes you right to the finish line. Did you follow that? Probably not. So let me share with you a more down-to-earth illustration that I heard. Suppose you want to swallow a whole long piece of spaghetti. Basically, you do two things. First, you get one end of that spaghetti in your mouth. Then all you have to do is give a good Mamma Mia suck on that spaghetti, and every inch of that tube of pasta will pull the next inch right in after it. Before I take you too far afield here and your eyes begin to glaze over, let's bring all this spaghetti math down to our brand new Christian experience. Day one, which is today, right now, you commit your life to God, lock, stock, and barrel. You decide to live in a trust relationship with Him. And you also spend some time today in getting to know Him. You invest some time in this brand new commitment by getting acquainted with Him through Bible study and prayer. Well, tomorrow, you do the same thing. You recommit your life to Jesus. You decide again tomorrow that you're going to give Him your entire self. And you spend time tomorrow getting more acquainted through more Bible study and prayer. What does this mean then? It means assurance, total assurance. You simply stay in that relationship every day. You give your life to Christ every day. You spend time with Him every day. And you keep right with it to the very end of the line. What could be more secure than that? It's that way in our marriages, isn't it? Let me tell you something. I happened to mention to my bride, Jeannie Jones, on our wedding day, August 27, 1967. I mentioned that I loved her. I told her I was committing my life to her, linking our futures together. Well, the next day, August 28, I did the very same thing again. I told her again that I loved her. I reaffirmed my commitment. I spent some time, in fact, pretty much the whole day, as I recall, getting better acquainted, and so on, right up to today. And you know something? Jean and I have experienced total assurance in our marriage relationship every step of the way. We don't walk around worried. We're not stressed out, wondering every day if we're still together. We know that our marriage is for keeps. Does that mean we don't have tough times? No, it surely doesn't. Every commitment in life is a hard one, especially our Christian commitment and our marriage commitment. Those are number one and number two on the personal Richter scale. With Jeannie and me, there are times when one or the other of us doesn't feel like being married any longer. There are days when we don't feel like spending the necessary time and communication. There are times when we're tempted maybe to just walk away from it all. But for over 5 decades, we've continued in our relationship. Because we do it every day, we've enjoyed continuous assurance even through the darkest times. I read something beautiful the other day in a book called The Victorious Christian Life by Dr. Tony Evans, who pastored the Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas. Here's his counsel for tough spiritual moments. When Satan rears his head and brings temptations our way, which he is certain to do, we flash our wedding vows of faith in his face and say, "Sorry, I'm married now. I have a brand new name and a new life to go with it. The person I was, along with all my old habits and shortcomings, no longer exists." Pastor Evans then adds this keen insight. A wedding ceremony generally takes place only once. However, we renew our wedding vows at the start of each new day and again throughout the day as we face decisions which propose a contamination of our commitment to stay married to the same person. Living the Christian life is no different. Choosing to yield ourselves to God is a process, not an event, that will continue throughout our lives. You know, there's one Bible verse that sounds as though it's contradicting everything we've said up until now. It goes like this. It's in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 12. Lonnie, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Wow. Does that wipe away everything we've said about salvation being a gift and God doing it all? Not at all, friend. Listen. It's hard to surrender. It's hard to enter into a commitment and hard to stay in it. Whether you're marrying Jeannie Jones or giving your life to Jesus Christ, there's a daily work to be done. But it's a good work, a friendship work, a surrender work, a relationship building work that brings lasting joy. If you don't believe me, just write to me in Arizona and ask Mrs. Jeannie Jones Melashenko.